of the real rights that is associated with properties, aside from ownership and security in mortgage bonds, is things like servitudes, as an example. So servitudes is basically a right that's registered over a particular property that's not necessarily tied to any specific individual. So to give an example, a lot of the servitudes or right of ways that exist on properties are things like roads and access points. So you'll find that a particular property is actually owned by an individual, but on that property, there's a road running through it with a fence, like on the side. It could be completely on the side. And when asked about it, they go, well, technically that road is on my property, but it had to be there. It had to be maintained in a certain way so that the guy at the back can actually have access to it. And you find a lot of this, especially when it comes to things like subdivisions, where one property in the front would have a right of access to the property at the back, and that sort of thing, so that there's good access points. So you find a lot of this. So basically, servitudes is just a right over a specific property. Now, the drafting or wording of the servitude can vary. So there's no singular way where we can say this is the rules of servitude, this is how you remove them, this is when they become obsolete, this is how you apply it. There's no specific answer because it depends on the circumstances. So you have some servitudes that no longer play any part anymore. So let's say, just as an example, you had a right of way to a property behind you, but there's been so much development on that property that property has its own access point somewhere else. Now this particular right of way has become obsolete. So there are ways of applying, getting consents and things like that to get these things removed. You can even tie it into an individual as an example. I've seen that being done before. And as an example, another example is a case that I'm working on now with a developer, where the developer is acquiring this property and he can build a whole bunch of units. It's going to be upper end. Everything's like, it looks really good. Made the offer, made subject to certain suspensive conditions, thankfully. And when looking at this and trying to do an assessment on the rezoning and subdivision, they found on the title deed that there was a servitude registered to the neighbor for a tennis court, right? And this completely came out the blue, because believe it or not, no matter how many times us as attorneys advise that people please read the title deeds, people don't until it's too late. And fortunately, this guy had suspensive conditions in. Because when we found this thing, it's completely drafted. I've never seen anything like this. It looks like it's a 20-year, it's limited to 20 years, but you can only cancel it upon payment. And long story short, if the tennis court was only there for 10 years, there's actually a fee that needs to be paid to the person that owns it. So the neighbor that has that right, that specific servitude, has to be paid for the price of the tennis court, for all maintenance, upkeep, and all of that, to a specific amount. And the developer's completely stuck now, in the sense that, well, he doesn't want to go ahead with the deal unless they can remove the servitude over the property. And it's an interesting case because but I mean, that's not relevant to today's story. So we're working on angles on how to actually resolve this. But it's just an example on what servitudes can actually be used. So if you had a neighbor that had a massive property and you want to invest in this property by putting up a small little building or putting up a tennis court, and you can get all the right licenses and all the right approvals and everything to do it, you can actually secure it. So let's say, for example, you had a guest house and you want a tennis court, your neighbor's got a massive property, he's not using it, you don't have space, and obviously you don't know what to do with it. You could very well approach your neighbor and come into an agreement where you invest, but you've got a servitude registered over that property for X period of time. Like this, they don't need to subdivide. There doesn't necessarily even have to be a rental agreement, which can be cancelled overnight, and now you've put so much money in. Real right, this thing is registered against the property, and you can use it for as long as it's there. So it's just an interesting idea for people and property owners to watch out for, but to also utilize. It might be something advantageous.
Yeah, and I think the major takeaway there is check your title deeds. You know, as you say, I think we both experience this problem where clients come and they find out about a servitude after the fact, and it's because it's on the title deed, you're in a stuck position, especially stuff like municipal servitudes, which run everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere you go in town, there are municipal servitudes registered over property, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're gonna sit there forever. It can really affect your investment. It can really affect your ability to use your property. So I think most important lesson there: check those title deeds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, guys, the title deed isn't that long a document. And I know when it comes to conditions, it gets muddled because some conditions like seem so old in terms of previous proclamations and legislation. You know, someone even in different languages. So you jump between English and Afrikaans. And the reason why that happens is because the conditions just keep getting added on. And some of them seem very stock standard. Some of them even seem irrelevant and outdated. Read through them anyway. Just double check, because we had one now where it seems stupid, but the guy could run a farming operation, but none of the structures could be made from a certain type of metal, but only from another type of metal. And it's so old that it doesn't even make sense anymore. You can't even find those products easily. But he can only store chickens, but if it's done in a very specific way. So just double check it, because now he has to go through the effort of trying to get this thing changed. And the worst part is the neighbors are leveraging it because they read the title deed too. So they keep threatening to take him to council if he doesn't comply, but obviously he can't comply. So just be careful. Like it's never easy. You can never just ignore it and say, but who's gonna check? Your neighbor will know. Council might not, but your neighbor will know what you're doing.
Exactly right.
Sure. But thanks so much, Nick. Yeah, so that was cool. So at least we did servitudes for a change, so something new.
Yeah.
Teaching
a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, have a great day. And yeah, thanks to all the viewers.
Thanks. You too, Bruno. Have a good one.